Yeah, hi, Kritika, hi, Anshu.
Hi.
Thanks for making a difference. Yeah, so I just wanted Anshu, like, if he could give some insights upon what kind of real life examples or mistakes that we do while raising PRs, as in just some examples of what mistakes in code you did, so a few examples that you could highlight upon or insights upon.
Yeah, so that's a good question actually. So the first mistake that basically every beginner level do, or basically I in the starting I used to do was that I mentioned that whenever I used to build a feature, right? Let's say that I'm building a checkout purchase flow, right? So user can basically go to the checkout page. They can basically select the whatever product that they want to buy, and then they can make the payment. There will be a lot of payment methods, and then they can make the payment through that. If I'm building this whole feature end to end, right? What I would do is that what I did actually was that I basically raise a single PR for that, and let's say that that PR has around 64 file changes. It has around 2.5k of diffs, if I'm not wrong, close to that. So now remember how people can basically how effective the review will be, right? It will be a nightmare. It was a nightmare for the reviewer, right? So
Right.
yeah, so that's the
I
first
can
thing.
imagine your situation over
Yeah,
there.
yeah. So that's the first mistake that basically I made. So now I basically tell to everyone that you basically what I could have done is that whenever I add a single component or single feature, let's say that I build a component for basically products, I will raise a PR for that, right? I basically build a feature for payment methods, right? And then for the payment, so every feature in that whole product spec should have been an individual PR, right? So that the person who is reviewing it would be can review it properly. So that's the first thing. The second thing that I have noticed is that whenever I think when I used to do raise the PRs, basically I was not the person who was basically very much kind of person who used to write a good documentation around the functions, right? Or the proper validations around the validation around the basically a function parameters, right? So basically this is one thing that a lot of people make the mistakes. I do it, like I notice it quite often, especially the person who's basically just getting a started up. So whenever you're writing a function, make sure that you are writing a proper JS doc, right? And in that JS doc you are explaining the every parameters, right? And also the return type of it, that basically what is the return, that the type of data that this function is returning, right? So that's the another thing. Another thing is that you should always validate your parameters of the function. That let's say that you build a add function, coming back to the previous example, that takes two number. What happens if someone calls that function with a single number, right? In that case, your function will return an NaN, right? So basically, adding proper default values or writing a function in a way that it should handle those edge cases. That if someone pass three parameters, it should add three numbers. If someone pass only one parameters, then at least it do not return a basically non-expected thing. So that's another thing. One more very common mistake that people make is that improper indentation, and I have noticed it quite often, right? So
Right.
just try to follow a proper indentation in your code. You generally don't give a much value to it, but trust me on that. Basically, over the period of time, if you write very improper code, it will be a nightmare for you itself to read the code and understand it, right? So following a proper indentation is really important, and a lot of people do not give enough focus on that. So having a linting in your code can solve that problem. So that's another thing. Another thing that I have noticed is that people do not write much of the test cases, right? So be it a unit test cases or integration test cases in the PR. So what happens is that every PR, generally in companies, it is mandatory to have a cases along with your PR. But if let's say that in your company it is not mandatory, I would say that still do it, so that the test cases give you enough confidence as a developer that whatever code that you have written is actually behaving in the way that you think, right? So that's another thing. Not only that, I also believe that when you write a unit test cases, it basically, because unit test case is basically help you to write better code, right? Now, how that happens, that's another topic of discussion. But trust me on that, if you start writing a unit test case and you see that there are a function which has a multiple if else and multiple nested logics or condition written, right, you will start realizing that you cannot write a unit test case for that, right, or the unit test case is getting failed. So you have to refactor your code. So that's another advice that I would give. Another thing that I basically really follow and that I have learned from my seniors is when you are writing a function, make sure that you are writing proper variable name. Make sure you are giving basically the functions names are basically proper. It should not be like you are not writing some improper variables names or functions names. That's another thing. Do not write duplicate code, right? So make sure that if you are writing a duplicate code, then you are writing your code incorrectly, right? That's the one thing that you can instantly realize. And I think writing a unit test case will find it out that okay, there are multiple duplicate code within your logic. You need to do one thing. Whenever you get into those scenarios, it's a time for putting that code in a function and using that function. So that's another thing. One more thing that I would say that use functions as much as you can, right? Functions not only allow you to reuse your code, but function always also allow you to think, increase your thinking skills, and basically help you to write unit test cases or integration test cases, right? Because you can always mock them. So yeah, these are the very pretty generic basics. I can go on for half an hour more, but the basic things that I have learned from my personal experience, and which also a lot of beginners make mistakes that people make.
Right. One of the things that what I have learned, like which I would like to add, like what my seniors told me, whenever you're writing any complicated code, I mean complicated logic, then just put a comment over there so that someone next who is coming after you can read that. My manager always says, write comment. Once you leave, no one will be able to understand this complicated logic. So yeah, that is one thing.
Yeah.